class is filling up, so we'll just give a couple more minutes for everyone to file in here. They're coming in pretty steady, so we'll get started in just about we're just going to get started just about now, but everyone else is still coming in. So good morning, everyone. Welcome back. You made it through the first week. That's great. Hopefully everybody's starting to figure out how this all works and getting used to being in school. Denise and I were talking about a couple things that we just sort of want to get out of the way first before we get started. And the first one was email etiquette. When you guys are sending emails to us, and not just to Denise and I, but anyone that you're sending emails to, and this is a lesson not just because, not just for us as your professors, but we want this to get through to you when it comes to industry as well. Your emails need to have a subject. Okay, put something in that subject line. It needs to have a greeting. So, good morning, Dino. Good morning, Denise. Whatever you want to put. Somewhere you have to, open up that email. Put whatever it is that you want to say into the body of the email. When you do that, make sure your spelling and punctuation is correct. I know that the email will actually, show you if you've done it right or not, or it'll highlight if there's a spelling error. Make sure you're doing that correctly, and then close it off with your name. We need to know who it is at the end. I can't tell you how many times we see examples of just really, really bad emails, and if those get out in the industry, it's going to make you look really, really bad. Your employers are not going to stand for that, okay? I remember a student sent me an email one time and was asking for help with something, and he addressed the email as "Hey," and then told me what he wanted to say. Of course, I never did respond. And then a few days later, he says, "Did you get my email? I asked you for help on something. You never responded." I says, "You mean the email addressed to Hey? Because I'm not sure who that was." And he got the message pretty quick. We are here to help you. We are here to support you. But you need to set these things up with a certain amount of respect, and you need to make sure that that's a habit that you get into. When you leave here, if you start an industry with that type of informal email that doesn't have spelling and punctuation and correct, doesn't say who you are properly, doesn't say who you're addressing it to, your boss is going to really have a hard time with you. Okay, so please make sure that you do that right. As far as emails go, we do not want to see anything from your Hotmail address. Okay, we don't want to see anything from your personal email addresses. They will get caught many times in our spam filters, and we'll never see them. If you want to send us an email, here's the easiest, simplest way to do it. Click over to Tools. Actually, no, I'll take that back. We've actually made it even one step easier for you. Instead of clicking over to Tools, click over to Email. Now, you have a choice here. You can send to all students, all instructors, or pick who you want to send to. If you want to send an email with a question about an assignment or the work that we're doing, here's what you're going to click. All instructor users. That means that Denise and I will both get the email for this course. And if I click it, watch what happens. It'll open up my email already addressed to Denise and I. Okay, and you can put in your subject, and you can put in whatever you want to put into the message. Whoops. And it's ready to go. All you have to hit is submit. So you don't need to remember our email addresses. You don't need to do anything other than click that. So I'm just going to bounce back one. Okay, it's in your Blackboard, and it's under the very bottom item, email. When you click email, you're going to choose all instructor users. It's a good idea to copy Denise and I on any questions that you have, because one or the other of us will answer that question for you. Okay, so when you click on all instructor users, it is going to automatically set up an email for you. This is going to come right from your college email address, so we'll know exactly who it is. And then you can put in the subject, and it's already addressed to the both of us. Okay, so let's make sure that we get the email etiquette down. You know, some of you may have some really strange names in your Hotmail addresses or even your Gmail addresses. We don't always know who it is. We've got 115 students that we look at. If you have initials or if you have some other, you know, nickname in there, we're not going to know who we're getting the email from. And then when you don't sign it and say who it's from, then we really don't know who it is. So emails, let's get that done properly. The other thing is computer issues. I'm hoping and presuming that all of you have got your I'm presuming that all of you have got your workbooks downloaded. You've got Adobe PDF on with Apps Anywhere, and so I'm sure you're going to be ready to go today. Okay, if not, you're going to have to go to IT and get that done. We put up all the IT addresses that you wanted to see. If you have problems, bear with them. They're going to be very, very busy, so you need to jump on it right away. Don't leave it to the last minute, or you might end up not getting help in time. Okay? Any other questions on this? I think one of the questions was, can you link this email address to your other email addresses? I believe you can. Honestly, I don't know how to do it because I just run both. I keep my Outlook email address open all the time, and I have my personal address separate. So, but I'm quite sure that you can do that, and someone will figure that out. You guys are smarter than us when it comes to figuring these things out. Okay, no other questions. We're filling up pretty good right now, so let's see if we can get started on today's lesson. All right. You're all enrolled in a class called Construction Estimating. Some of you may not know what that is or why you're taking it. I want to get into some of what it is that we're doing and why you're doing it. Hopefully give you some background on it. We did put something in the announcements, and let me just... Let me just go back to the announcements. We did put a little link in the announcements that we thought was interesting. An item out of LinkedIn called Hug Your Estimator Today. And it's just an article that I came across and thought this is nice for the students to be able to see. It talks a little bit about what this job function is in the industry and talks about how important it is, and you know, gives you some background. So feel free to read through that. We're not testing you on that, so you don't have to do anything other than read it. Okay, construction estimating. So one of the things that we want to, and it's going to be a bit difficult. We were going to have you turn on your video cameras, but for all 66 of you, that's going to be a little bit difficult. And one of the things that I always do when we're in class and I go through the attendance list, some of your names, especially our international students, can be a little bit hard for us to pronounce. We like to know what you like to be called. Some of you maybe have, you know, we have listed in Blackboard your first and second names, or maybe just your first name, but you don't go by your first name. You have another name that you go by. I'd like to know what that is, because I want to make sure that I address you in the way that you'd like to be addressed. If you're an international student and you can see us struggling with, you know, saying your name, we'd like some help in letting us know if you want to go by another name, that's fine, or if you want to help us with the pronunciation of that name, we'd like to know that. Okay, so what we'll do is, if you have any if any of you want to be sort of called by a different name or can help us with pronunciation, just send us an email. Let us know what it is, and our spreadsheet that we use for attendance, we'll put that down beside your name so we know how to address you properly. Okay. Denise, I don't think we're going to get them to turn on the video cameras today, are we?
No, I don't think so.
We would love to do that, but there's just way too many in the group. So we're going to find a way. As soon as we get our first quiz, we will be able to see all of you because you will have to have your cameras on for that. Okay. Quick review. Every single week, announcements go up. They're either going to go up Saturday morning around 1 a.m. or Sunday morning at 1 a.m. My second and third year students, I put them up on Sunday. You guys, we put them up on Saturday. That's what's going to tell you what's happening this week. If there's a test or a quiz, you will have had prior notification. You will know as soon as you wake up on Saturday morning, you'll be able to find out what's happening this week. So when we get to Monday morning and we say we're having a quiz and you say, I didn't know anything about a quiz. Well, you did if you would have read the announcement. So please make sure that's part of your routine, that you prepare for what's coming up. And you need to read them every week. They're pretty much going to follow the teaching and learning plan that we have on Blackboard. But sometimes we're going to run into situations where we make a change. Okay, we may have a time when we're needing a little bit of extra time on a certain subject, and we push it off a day. Well, you need to know that, and we'll tell you that in the announcements each week. Every week there is every single lecture that we do, there is a recording of it. So I just want to quickly go to that. If you go on to Blackboard and you hit Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, which is what you're in right now, it's very slow.
Wow, it's quite a delay.
I should have got one of those new ones like you got, Denise. Okay, so in Collaborate Ultra, there's a little menu bar, top left corner here. Click on that, and it'll show you recordings. And it shows you our Class 1 recording is here, and you can choose to watch it right now and review that recording. Okay, so when you want to review what happened, if you missed class for any reason, or if you need a refresher, this is where you do it.
You can also just click on, Class 1 as well.
Right. Okay. No, and we're on campus, Hernan. We're not going to record them because we will be doing it in the classroom in front of you. We weren't doing it through Collaborate Ultra. That's the recording mechanism is Collaborate. So when we're on campus, there won't be recorded lectures, which is better because teaching you in person is so much better than teaching you online. Okay, so our suggestion is, of course, read the announcement. If you need to review the lecture recording, make sure you've got the workbook downloaded. And when I say downloaded, I mean I do not want you running it through Blackboard. You need to save a copy on your computer, and that's the copy that you use. And the course policy, which we've talked about, many of you have submitted that already. We need you to read it, sign it, and submit it. Okay?
Do we still have quite a bit of people outstanding with that submission for the?
I'm not sure.
I'll look right now while you're.
Okay. Okay, so let's get started in a bit of background into what it is that we do, what it is that this whole construction estimating process is And let's talk about sort of the hierarchy of what happens in a construction project. Every project has some of what we see here. May not be every single step in this organization chart, but for most cases, most of these things appear. Well, we all work for the owner of the project, whoever hired us to do the work. The owner is, in most cases, unless he's very rich and has all kinds of cash to throw around, is beholden to a bank. Someone loaned them the money in order to get a project done. So the owner has to answer to the bank, the people who gave him the money. But the owner, in most cases, is going to hire some professionals to do the job. Sometimes we work directly for the owner, but any bigger project, the owner is going to need to hire some professionals. He's going to hire an architect. He's going to hire an engineer. Sometimes the architect hires the engineer, but they're all going to be on this level, and the general contractor. And a general contractor is someone who takes overall responsibility for building this job, okay? And that general contractor usually doesn't do all of the specialty work on the project, so he's going to hire various numbers of subcontractors. And, you know, I've shown you 4 here. There could be as many as 15 or 20 subcontractors on a project. So that's sort of the hierarchy. And the reality of it is, somewhere there's money being lent for this project to happen. It comes from someone. The people lending the money are oftentimes the people who need to be in control of a project. Who do we work for? Well, we can work for financial institutions. So we can work for the bank, the ones who are actually funding the project, in a cost consulting role. Our students work for architects. Our students work for engineers. They work for general contractors and subcontractors. Okay. Now, when you're working for an architect, you may not be using all the estimating skills that I'm teaching you here. You may be preparing drawings, but there's going to be many times in that role that you may be required to calculate quantities of material and calculate pricing. The other thing is, as working for an architect or an engineer, you may be reviewing bids by general contractors, and you need to understand how that pricing took place. So the skills that we're going to give you in construction estimating apply to every step of that chart. So you can work for the bank, you can work for the architects, the general contractors, the engineers, or any of the subcontractors. There's always opportunities for us to work for any of these people in this project. And before we go too far, I just want to point out in these slides, and we'll make these slides available to you after class, but usually what I'll do is when I have things that I kind of want to draw your attention to, oftentimes those are going to show up underlined and in yellow. Okay, so I'm going to highlight those. And I'm just highlighting them because at some point in time, there may be a quiz in which you're going to have to remember some of these things. It will be open book, so you can use your workbook, but I'm sort of drawing your attention to some of the key points by highlighting it this way. Okay, what do we do? Well, what we generally associate as work with estimators is preparing bids. We are the guys who make an estimate, which becomes the bid for a project. In other words, the bid is a proposal that says we'll do the work for X number of dollars. Okay, but we also get involved with calculating the costs or the budget costs at the feasibility stage before the drawings are done, before the actual project is ready to start getting built. Someone may just be looking at a proposal and saying, hey, I'd like to put an apartment building in. How much do you think that'll cost? We can be involved in those early stages. When it's moved off of the feasibility stage and actually is being drawn up by an architect, oftentimes decisions need to be made throughout that whole design process as to how much things are going to cost, and maybe if they cost too much, they might have to change what they're going to do. So we're involved with the cost in the design stage. When the project is happening, we may be involved with monitoring the costs on the job week to week, month to month, to make sure that everything is staying within budget. And of course, we're always measuring quantities. Our skill set is to read drawings, understand them, and understand how to interpret that into quantity calculations. When there are disputes, and certainly there can always be situations where there may not be full agreement in a project, where someone thinks something should cost a certain amount, someone doesn't agree with that amount. We can get into situations like that. We can get into situations where someone did a lot of extra work and doesn't feel like they're being paid enough for that work. So that's when a claim would be filed on a project. We can be involved in that process. Managing the project day to day. And when an argument or a disagreement between parties, and that could be between the general contractor and the architect. Oftentimes when they're not in agreement with how much certain things should cost, and a project could end up with someone saying, you know, we lost money, and we lost money because this certain party didn't do what they were supposed to do, and so we're putting in a claim for $10 million extra. Those claims need to be settled somehow. And there's a process called arbitration. And what that means is, in the industry, that's a process where instead of going to court, instead of being in a situation where there's been lawsuits filed and parties are taking each other to court, there can be an arbitration process where someone is, the two parties get together with an independent group, and that independent group looks over the submissions and makes a decision that everybody agrees to abide by. That's called an arbitration process. And oftentimes, our skill set lends itself very well to that because we understand numbers, we understand quantities, we understand dollars. And so we may be involved as being an arbitrator and helping to mediate a disagreement with two parties. So the pre-construction process, there's a few steps that happens before construction ever happens. And the first one is recognition of need. And basically what we're talking about is someone has decided that there's a good opportunity to build a building. And perhaps in this case, someone near Niagara College says, I'd like to build a large condo, and that's going to be, a good residence for students to move into. So they've decided that they should do this. But before they're actually going to do it, they need to find out whether it makes sense. And there's a feasibility study that's going to happen. They're going to look at it and say, well, what are the vacancy rates? Is there a very low vacancy rate? If there is, that means that we could handle another student residence. But am I going to get my money's worth out of this thing? Is it going to take me 50 years to get my money back, or can I get the money back in 10 years? Does this make sense? So we have to look into the feasibility of whether this should be done or not. Once we've decided that yes, it should be done, then we're going to go to an architect and we need to get detailed plans and specifications. Okay, we're not going to do a project just based on sketches. It's got to be done properly. It's got to be approved. And so we need to hire professionals to do that. And after that whole process happens, before any shovels go into the ground, the proper approvals need to be obtained. Okay, and that means that a building permit has to be obtained. You have to make sure that everything that you've done is drawn or engineered and designed properly to the building code. in the city or district that you're working in, it may be that you're putting in a building that isn't allowed based on the zoning for that area. At that point in time, you may need to apply for changes to zoning bylaws, and that could turn into a process that really stonewalls your entire project. You might have done every single step up to this point. You even have plans that are drawn and approved, but if you're not allowed to build that certain type of building in that certain area, you need to have that zoning change prior. And Denise can definitely speak to that. She actually participates in that zoning process with the town of Fort Erie, and they have to look at requests coming in where people say, okay, I know this is a residential area, but I want to put this certain type of building, or I know the bylaw says that we have a certain setback, but I want to do something different, and I need you to approve that. And Denise, I assume most of those go through okay, but perhaps sometimes they don't.
No, a lot of the times they go okay only because they have had pre-consultations with staff. And so if something staff doesn't like at first, usually the applicant will make changes so that they are not in violation of any zoning requirements or setbacks and things of that nature. So they come to an agreement where the town staff can support the application.
And if they're proposing something that's a radical change, there's a chance that they get denied, right?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
So we could have gone through all this and then get down to a zoning change and realize that we can't build the type of building that we want in the location that we want to build it. Okay, so let's say we got through all that stuff. Everything went great. We start the construction process, and the construction process starts with the tendering process, which is basically saying, okay, we've got all of our approvals in place. We have a set of drawings. Now we need to find someone to build this. And so we go through what's called the tendering process, and we accept a bid from contractors. Sometimes we need to pre-qualify those contractors before they're even allowed to bid. Okay, sometimes we'll have a list of 20 contractors, and they're told, you need to prove to us that you're capable of doing this project first. And in the end, there may be only 8 or 10 of those that actually pass the approval process. But now that they can all submit a bid for this project that we want to do. Once we've decided who we want to award the contract to, we're going to award them a contract. Logic says the lowest price. Why do I say maybe? Why would I not want the lowest price on a project? If I've got 10 bidders, okay. Good comments here, guys. Quality. Now, one of the things about quality is I don't necessarily know the quality that they're going to build if I haven't had them build for me yet. So I don't necessarily know about their quality. And part of that pre-selection process, part of that pre-qualification process is to make sure that the people who are bidding are quality builders. So let's presume that they've all passed the pre-qualification, and therefore we know they're all qualified to do the work. And Chasey, you had a point that a higher price can possibly do it better. We don't know that for sure. Let me just hang that up. And yeah, so there's a lot of things to consider here, but let me paint a scenario for you. I put a tender out for a project. I've got 5 bidders. 4 of them come in between $20 and $22 million for the project, and I get one bid that's $12 million. Now, if you guys were spending money, and you got the chance to buy something for $12 million instead of $20 million, wouldn't you want to spend the $12 million instead of $20 million? But if I've got 4 bidders that all bid between 20 and 22 million, and someone bid 12 million, doesn't that say that there could be a problem here? That one bidder might have made a mistake, maybe didn't, that there could be a numerical mistake, that maybe they didn't understand the work properly. And so the lowest price in that case, that's going to fall into the maybe category, because I just don't know if that is, I don't know if I could have confidence in that price. Now, that's not to say that in industry, sometimes you won't get awarded that project. And imagine you're the estimator, and you watched a bunch of bids get open, and they were all 20 to 22 million dollars, and yours was 12, and you realize, uh-oh, I made a mistake here. And then afterwards they say, congratulations, you just got a job. So you're now in the position where you have to figure out, how do I make up $10 million on this project? Or do I have to back away and say, I'm sorry, I can't accept the project, there was a mistake? Okay, so that process can be a bit nerve-wracking if you're, if that type of mistake happens. But sometimes the lowest price is not the price we want to accept for a project. And you're right, Thomas, the owner of the company might turn around and say, no, we're giving you that project and we're holding you to it. The problem with that is that you've now put a contractor into a position where they have to find every possible way they can to make back that money that they're losing. And that process is going to happen throughout the job. So for the next year, you might be dealing with someone who wants to claim for every single possible extra and is making up situations where they think things are going to be extras. That process could be much more difficult than you would ever imagine. And that process could, in the end, cost you more money, or it could affect the quality of the building that you're going to get. So oftentimes, when there's big shifts in those prices, that lowest price may get thrown out. And then the next step is, now that we've got a contractor that we want, we trust them, they're actually going to build a building. Okay, we talked about a takeoff. We said we're going to do a takeoff. A takeoff is going to consist of some components. The first is going to be materials. And most of what we're going to do with you guys is calculate quantities of materials. Once I know the quantities of materials that go into a project, then I can figure out how much labor I need to actually build that project. Okay, I can't do a labor takeoff without a material calculation. And once those two are done, then I can determine how much equipment I need to complete the project. So our takeoff, our final takeoff, is going to include quantities of material, durations of labor, and durations and quantities of equipment. But when I finish, I take my takeoff, I add pricing to it, and I create an estimate. The estimate is the sum of the takeoff and the pricing. Okay, and that's what's going to determine how much profit I make on a project. Let's face it, we are going to, we're owning this business to make money, and we need to make sure that we have covered all the costs and have proper amount of profit in a project. I'm showing you a pretty stressed out estimator here Colton, you can understand where that's coming from. It can be a stressful situation, and part of what can happen is we can make errors. What type of errors do we make as estimators? Math? Sure. We can definitely make mathematical mistakes. We can make errors in just transposing information from a drawing. We read something wrong. We thought a concrete slab was supposed to be 4 inches thick, but it's supposed to be 14 inches thick. We wrote down 4, now we have a problem. And omissions. There's a lot of things to consider in doing a bid. If we leave things out, that could be a big problem for us. How do we mitigate these errors? Checking our estimates. Okay, every single one of these errors can be fixed by double checking the work that we did in our estimate. And as an estimator, oftentimes I'm going to need my supervisor, sometimes another estimator, but someone needs to check our work before we're done. So especially when you guys get into industry and you're a young junior estimator, you're going to do work on your own, but someone is going to check that work. And what you want to do is get into the habit of finding ways to check yourself. So in school, one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to find a partner. You're going to find someone that you work with, that you get along well with, and you may end up doing some projects together as partners. And when you do, you're going to make sure that one partner checks the other partner's work. Okay, and if you're doing a project, the projects we're doing for our classes are relatively small, so both of you can do the work. And our suggestion is from day one, if both of you are doing the work, then both of you check each other's work at the end. Compare your answers. And when you find a big discrepancy, that's what puts you down this path of finding out, was it a math mistake? Did I write something down wrong, or did I forget something? Okay, so you guys can really learn to maximize this process of checking by working well with another one of your classmates. So in order to help you try to eliminate some of these errors before they happen, these are our rules for doing a takeoff. Okay, we want you to read the specification. Reading the specification, in our case, is going to be our instructions to you. Okay, once you get out in the industry, you might have a 500-page document that's the specifications, but we're going to start you off nice and easy with a page, whether it's out of your workbook or we post it on Blackboard, and that assignment has instructions. You need to read the instructions before you read the drawing, before you start calculating anything. Read what's there. When you're done, read it again, get a highlighter of some type, and certainly red pencil, if there's anything that you can see, hey, we got to draw our attention to this. Any way you can mark it up, read the specs and know what you're dealing with first. Then read the drawings. Okay. And we want you guys to get in the habit of read what's in front of you before you start doing takeoff. It's easy to pick up that first number and say, hey, I can jump right into this thing. That's a bad habit to start. And I can tell you, in my years of doing estimates, there would be many times I would start a takeoff, I would write up a page of information, and then throw that page away and start again. And I might do that 2, 3, 4 times before I'm finally saying, okay, now I've got a handle on this thing. Now I'm going to start writing down what I need to know. Okay, so but that process would happen as I'm making notes, reading the specs, making notes, reading the drawings, and then saying, oh, here's something completely different. So I'm going to throw that away and start all over again. Our suggestion to you is, when you're doing a drawing, get into the habit of reading drawings the same way. Okay, and it's just a matter of how you guys are comfortable with reading drawings. The drawings we're going to give you are pretty straightforward, but you might get into a situation where there's 50 drawings that you have to read. So get in the habit of, develop a routine in how you read them. And as you complete items, as you get through your project, check off what you've done. Okay, there's nothing worse than a situation when you're counting doors or windows or something on a project, and you count it up 57 windows, and your phone rings. And you answer the phone, you have a conversation with someone, you get off the phone, you look back at the drawing and say, no, where did I leave off? Well, if you had checked off each one of those 57 windows, and when the phone rang, you wrote 57 beside the last one, you'd know where to pick up. So check off your drawings, mark up as you're doing the work. And anytime you can duplicate something, take advantage of it. Okay? If I have the same thing twice, 3 times, 10 times, 15 times, make sure that you're taking advantage of any time you can duplicate things. And you need to describe what you've taken off. If you write concrete, that might be great for you, but someone at some point in time has to order that concrete. They don't know what grade of concrete, whether it's 20, 25, 30 MPa. They don't know if there's anything special about it. If all you described was concrete, then you can be sure at some point in time someone's going to come back to you as an estimator and say, now, tell me what you really want, because I'm the one responsible for ordering it, and I need to know what you want me to order. So get in the habit of fully describing what it is that you're calculating. Okay, so based on the article that was on LinkedIn, what are the things that we care about? We care about covering the costs in a project. And I had one of my bosses told me this years and years ago, and it always stuck with me. He said, there's one thing I want you to remember as an estimator is cover your costs. And I listened to him. I certainly did that. It took a long time for me to really grasp what that meant. And covering the costs on a project means that I've done an accurate quantity takeoff, that I have an accurate number and I know exactly what the quantities are on the job and they're done correctly. When he got to the point where he had confidence that I did estimates accurately, then he had the discretion to sometimes say, you know what, this is a tight situation. We need to cut our profits on this job because we really need to get the job. It meant that when I told him a project was going to cost $750,000, he might want to add $200,000 to that price. But if the project was really tight, he might say, I'm only going to add $100,000 to that price, or maybe I'm only going to add $50,000 to that price. But he was confident that the $750,000 that I told him was accurate, and it covered all the costs of the project. So he had the discretion now to decide what the profit should be over and above that number. If he didn't have confidence in what I was doing, he would look at my $750,000 and say, you know, he's pretty sloppy. He doesn't always cover everything. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to push that up. I'm going to have to push his $750,000 up to about $800,000 or $850,000 just to make sure that we cover the costs. Now I can add profit over and above that. Okay, so we have to have our supervisors become confident that we properly cover our costs. And then what else do we care about? We care about winning projects. Our whole job is to win projects. Okay. What kind of skills do we need to have? Well, obviously we need good math skills. I think that goes without saying. Strategy, certainly part of how we differentiate ourselves from other contractors is sometimes we find a better way to build a project. Okay, there should be the same quantity of materials for every contractor, but the one who figures out the best way to do the project, oftentimes the one who wins the project. We need to be able to read and comprehend everything in those drawings and specifications. This is a really important one, visualization skills. Okay, and we'll try to do our best to help you with that. We'll put pictures in as often as we can, but there's no substitute for actually seeing things in real life. And so I want you guys to, when it comes to visualization, I want you guys to take that to heart. And those videos that I put up are really going to help you with that visualization process. Okay, you have to understand what it really looks like. When you're reading on a drawing, it just doesn't help. It doesn't solve all the problems for you. It doesn't fill in all the gaps. Denise and I have been doing this long enough that you know, we look at a drawing and we kind of see it in our mind what that's going to look like. You guys haven't got to that point yet, so take advantage of anything you can. And if it means just walking by a construction site, stopping and just looking around and seeing what's there, you need to help yourself to relate a 2D image on a drawing to 3D image in real life. Okay, our job is always under continuous review. We are scrutinized all the way through the process, which is a good thing. Excuse me. In the pre-construction phase, before when we're just bidding a project, I hope my work gets scrutinized, because I want someone else to find the errors, if they were, before the project starts. Throughout the project, we're always involved with what's going on site, and even after it. One of the things that oftentimes we're going to do as estimators is we're going to review the project. We're going to go back on the project at the end and say, okay, how did we do? Just because we made some money on the project doesn't necessarily mean that we did well. Okay, we could have, we might get some happy errors, we call them. You might have a mistake that was significant in one area, but you made another mistake that was significant in another area, and they canceled each other out. Well, I'd really like to know what those are, because I do not want to take the chance that I make that mistake again the next time. Because the next time, it might not be a happy error, it might just be an error. So we're oftentimes going to review a project at the end and find out exactly what we did well and what we didn't do. Colton, you said that your dad is a supervisor of nickel plant. What plant is that he's a supervisor of? Okay. And he took the construction engineering technology program 30 years ago. So 30 years, we're talking about 1990, 1991. Okay, Denise, that's before your time, right? And that's after my time.
Yeah, it's before my time. We also get quite a few, like, so what do you call them? Children of people who have, so like Colton, so his dad was in the program and now he's in the program. We get a lot of that. So yeah, legacy students, exactly. So that kind of speaks for the program itself, right? So it's an excellent career to get into. And the program, you can go in other avenues. You don't just have to be in the estimating side of it. Okay, so it's an excellent avenue for employment. And we get not repeat customers. We get referrals, I guess, for they want their sons and daughters to come as well.
Yeah, we've had, just the time I've been here, I've taught many students who I maybe, well, in fact, one of the students that we just graduated last year, his father was one of my classmates when I was in the program. So the fact is that some contractors who have graduated from this program are telling their kids, you're not taking over this business until you've gone to Niagara and taken the construction engineering program. So they're confident with what we do. They're confident with the education level that you guys are getting. And so oftentimes the children of former students are coming back here to be students again. which is nice. Colton, what's your dad's first name? Okay. Just out of curiosity, I'll check with one of my buddies who graduated around that time. You may know him. Okay, so again, that's just the article that was in LinkedIn. Just some of the points that we sort of pulled out of there that we think is worth it for you to know.
Before we start in, I just want the course policy upload, just looking at the numbers, yep. Looks like we still have about 30 people who need to read that document and sign it and upload it. If you're not sure, whether or not that you did it, you can go to My Grades in the course, and you will see a row in there that says Course Policy Upload. And if you do not see a little, I think it's a yellow exclamation mark. Yeah, so if you go to Tools, go to My Grades. You'll notice that the course policy, so Dino has not submitted his, but nope. You should see a little link there of what you submitted. Okay, and when you do see the icon there, you can even click on that icon and it will open up the file that you did submit. So please make sure that you do that.
And we'll remind you about this a couple times, but after next week, we'll probably just stop reminding you. Okay, we've given you enough reminders to know that you have to do it. And then the first time you submit work that needs a grade, and we did say in the first class that in order for us to grade your work, we need to have this contract or this agreement between you and us established. So in the first time that we actually grade some of your work, and everybody in the class is looking at their marks, and you're saying, why did I get a 0? I submitted that thing. Hopefully you'll remember that, yes, we aren't going to put grades to it unless you've submitted your course policy. So usually at that point, we get a flood of course policies coming in. Now, the self-study work is not going to be marked by us. It's marked by Blackboard. If you've jumped into that, you've seen that Blackboard does come up and give you the mark and the answers. Those are not part of your total grades. They're just there for your own benefit, okay? And I've set it up so that whether you get the right answer or the wrong answer, I give feedback on each one of those, okay? So you're just doing it for yourself. If you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. If you need help with the math, that's the first place to look. Okay, students often come to us late in the term and say, well, can we find a tutor? We need help with this. Well, this is the first step in you getting help, is to do this. Janusz, we're going to get to that, so don't worry about that situation now. And you bring up a good point, Janusz, that sometimes the answer that you see on Blackboard, you're looking at it saying, that's, I got that answer. Why did it mark me wrong? Again, it doesn't matter because the marks don't count. They're not going on your grade, and I'm going to give you feedback on the answer, whether it's right or wrong. So in either case, if you look at my feedback and say, well, it marked me as wrong, but I think it's right, you're getting the same feedback whether it was right or wrong. And if you're confident that it's right, that's fine. Blackboard is very, very, very particular, okay? If we put an answer in Blackboard, and you answer it to a different number of decimal places, it'll mark you as wrong. You're not wrong, you did it right, but Blackboard is picky like that. So we are aware of that, and it's just for this assignment, whether you got it right or wrong, again, it doesn't really matter. It's just what matters is you get to look at the answer and see what the feedback is and say, okay, yeah, I did it right or I did it wrong, okay? We're almost an hour in. We need to take a break before we start into the next section of this lecture. So let's take a break. We'll come back in 10 minutes.
Dino, can you just pop underneath course information and leave that up on the screen while we're gone for break? Just to show where the PDF is for the course policy and where the upload is.
There we go. So you get the course policy here by clicking on PDF, and you upload that policy here with this link. And self-study, I believe, is under assignments.
Yes, it is.
All right. We'll see you all at 11:35.
Dino, your email's on the screen.
Okay, guys, I'm back. I'm just not able to get my video working right now. Still trying.
I think that's okay, Dino. You appear as a small little postage size in the bottom corner, so
Yeah,
it's
not adding too much.
So.
Okay, let's move forward. The next part of the lecture, we're talking about, so now we've sort of gone over a little bit of an overview of what we do, how we fit into the industry. We're going to talk about the actual process of doing estimates. Okay, so the estimating process. What is our process? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get contract documents. And the contract documents can be a big package, could be a lot of information, and we're responsible for it. So that's going to consist of drawings, which obviously it consists of drawings. This is why you guys are learning to do drafting, so that you're able to, one, get a job as a drafter, and two, be able to understand how to read drawings. The second part, just as equal, is the written specifications, and those two don't need to be labeled 1 and 2. They can be labeled both 1 because they really are one item. Okay, the written specs, they're much more boring than the drawings, but they are just as important to a project. throughout the process of you working on an estimate, there may be addenda, and I make that the plural because it's very, very seldom that there's only one addendum to a project. The reality is there probably will be many. And they are now just as important as the drawings and specs. As soon as they're issued, they become part of what you're responsible for. And in the contract documents, oftentimes the contract, the agreement form that you will have to sign when you're successful, will be included in the contract document. So you receive a package, and it shows you what the building looks like. It tells you all the specs that goes into the building, and it gives you an example of the contract that you're going to sign. So you can't later on go back and say, oh, we didn't know that was in the contract. Well, no, they gave you a copy of it, so you need to be prepared for that. And if there's anything that you object to, that you'd have to raise that question during the estimating process. Okay, so in that process, there's usually a pre-bid meeting. Okay, the pre-bid meeting is happening, before the bid, and oftentimes all the interesting parties are invited. So you may go to a pre-bid meeting, and there might be an architect, there might be a consulting engineer, and there could be 10 other contractors there as well. Okay, I remember bumping into one of our students at the college, and we were doing something, and I saw one of my students there. Next thing you know, I saw another one come walking up, and these are all graduate students, of course, and they were both there to attend a pre-bid meeting at the college where all the contractors who were going to bid were invited to come and attend a meeting where they would talk about all the things that were going to happen. That's when you're going to review the project. You're going to give the interested parties an opportunity to raise some questions and get some answers before the whole process even starts. Okay, what parties are involved? Well, a contractor is anybody who works in accordance with the terms of a contract. Okay, there are different levels of contractors. So the general is the one who usually has the overall responsibility of the project, and there's a contract between the owner and the general contractor. Okay, I shouldn't say lower levels, but below that level are subcontractors, and those subcontractors work for the general contractor. Even though the owner is the one who's responsible, if you're a subcontractor, you answer to the general contractor, not to the owner. Okay, and this is maybe one of those areas that can sometimes lead to disputes. A subcontractor is doing a certain type of flooring in a building, and the owner comes on site one day and says, "Oh, that's not what I wanted. I need you guys to change this carpet to this type of carpet." And that subcontractor goes ahead and orders that different type of carpet, and then he sends a change order into the general contractor. General contractor says, "What's this?" He says, "Well, the owner told us to do it." "Well, I didn't tell you to do it. You don't work for the owner, you work for me." So the responsibility for the subcontractor is the general contractor. And if you were to do something like that, you could end up not getting paid for that work because you didn't follow the proper protocol. General contractor, private contractors, yes, they're the same thing. And one of our jobs, if we're working for a general, because a lot of you may end up working for a general contractor, a big part of your job is making sure that the scope of work is clearly defined for the subcontractors. Because as I said, the subcontractor works for the general. So if you find yourself in a situation where your subcontractor says, "Hey, you didn't tell me about that. You didn't tell me that I had to do this. In fact, you sent me over 5 drawings, and this information is on drawing number 6. You didn't send me that." Well, that's not the owner's problem anymore. That's now your problem as a general, because you didn't make sure that that subcontractor had a clearly defined scope of work. Okay, especially on smaller jobs, you may not send 30 drawings over to the subcontractor if their portion of the work is all covered under one drawing. You may give them one drawing, you may give them one portion of the spec and say, here, give me a price on this. But you need to make sure that you give them exactly what they need in order to do their price. Subcontractors are those who specialize, okay? So this is a masonry contractor. This guy's a ceramic tile contractor. This one's a painter. Those are contractors who are specific to a trade and specialize in a trade. And as a general contractor, we would hire all three of those subcontractors to work for us to do the project. The estimating process starts, as we've been saying all along, with a takeoff. Takeoff is reviewing the drawings and reading the specs and calculating the quantities of labor and material required to do a job. So we're going to take a set of drawings and turn it into an estimate. Here's an estimate worksheet with all the details of how much plywood and lumber and everything else we need. And it also includes a labor calculation as to how many shifts it's going to take or how many hours it's going to take to do this job. The estimate is what happens when I take that quantity takeoff and put the dollars to it and put profit to it and calculate a total cost for the project. When I calculate material cost, oftentimes I'm going to get suppliers to either maybe bid the project for me, or I'm going to use suppliers' price lists. And if any of you have been here in Ontario in the last 6 months, you know what's happened to things like lumber. Okay, the price of lumber has jumped 4 or 5 times what it should be because of COVID and problems that happened with COVID. Steel, both for rebar and structural steel, is an item that's very volatile, and it can go up and down quite a bit. So it's our job as an estimator to ensure that our material costs are correct. And it may mean that we go to our supplier and ask them to give us a price, a current price for the materials that we're going to use on that project. But we also have to calculate labor costs. And labor costs can be highly variable, okay? We can be, when I talk about worker skill and productivity, we could be bidding a project where maybe we don't have a lot of skills in, maybe something new to us. It's going to take us longer to do that work than another contractor who is more skilled and does it all the time. How do I get, what's the best way that I can find what the productivity should be on the job? Look at what I did last. Okay, if I'm building a certain type of building and I build 10 of them a year, when I'm finished, I should be analyzing those projects and coming up with a number that says, okay, pouring concrete on this project, you know, it took our 10-man crew 12 days to pour it, and there was X number of cubic meters of concrete. So I can turn around and say that I have X number of hours for so many cubic meters. The next time I do a project, I'm going to analyze that one as well. If I find the trend is that I'm getting worse, I need to correct that. But there may be another reason why I'm getting worse. And so the analysis of my past work informs how I should bid the next project. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely right, Colton. Projects do get canceled sometimes just because of things like that. My son was actually working on a project in British Columbia on Vancouver Island, and they got halfway through the project and they were actually building a bunch of condos and a couple of multi-use buildings, and they were doing it with prefabbed wood panels. So the walls were all prefabbed on the project, and they got about a month into the project and the supplier just informed the owner that they're no longer supplying prefab panels because the cost of wood had gone up so high that they are just going to stop supplying them. And the job was basically put on hold because of that. The direct material cost to manufacture a particular product, that's the cost, that's up to the supplier of that material. Okay, that they know what their costs are. That's why we need them to quote us on those costs, so we're aware of how much the current cost of that material is. Okay, so we talked about materials and labor. Equipment costs. There's more to the cost of equipment than just purchasing it. You know, if I buy this piece of equipment, I expect that equipment is maybe going to last me 20 years. So I need to make sure that each job that I do over the next 20 years recovers a portion of the cost of this equipment. But there's more than just the equipment. Okay, if I had to borrow money and I'm paying interest on that, if I have to have a maintenance cost every once in a while to maintain that equipment, there could be insurance costs. So there's a lot that goes into the price that we would put into an estimate for equipment. And in most cases, we have an accountant in our company who's going to work up that and tell us, okay, when you're putting this piece of equipment on a project, I need you to put in $50 an hour for every hour that this equipment is on site. And that's how we recover those costs. The key to that is I need to know how many hours it's going to be on site. I can't know that unless I know how much material in my quantity takeoff. It's important, and we're going to do our best to sort of steer you in this direction and guide you in this direction, that we use a consistent process when we do our work. Why do we want consistency? Because it's going to lessen the chance that we're going to make mistakes. And here's the important part. It's easier to transfer information to other estimators, project managers, or accounting staff. And what I should put in here is, or teachers, the people who are going to mark our work. If we get, when we want to give you guys the skills that you're going to put a consistent process together so that when everyone looks at your work, they're used to seeing, okay, here's how he does this. Okay, he has a certain format in which he works. Now it becomes easier for those people to check your work and spot if there's a mistake. If you just write things down on a page haphazardly, you may find that you're getting told to turn around and go back and redo it. Okay, and Denise and I will get to a point in our marking where we may say to you, this is not acceptable, especially if you're doing work by hand. We may just tell you, this is not acceptable. We're not marking this. You need to go back and put this into a easy to read format, which we're providing to you in order to make you conform to the consistent process. We're doing it for your benefit. Completeness, obviously, excuse me, I need to make sure that everything that I'm supposed to put in has been put in, that I've taken the time and effort to review the plans and specs. And here's an important thing. What might be shown on one drawing may be different on another. Or what might be showing in my specification might be different on the drawing. Okay? We have to understand there's a lot of people involved in this process. There's an architect, there's engineers, there's multiple people in each of those offices. Sometimes we'll get a set of drawings and page 7 says that the foundation wall is 8 inches thick, but page 17 says it's 12 inches thick. We need to make sure that we've covered that. And that means asking a question and getting a proper answer on what it should be. And of course, it's not just the drawings, it's the specifications as well to make sure that they're covered. The addenda, every time there's a change, we've got to make sure that that's included in my estimate. The common procedures that we're going to show you, we know from our experience that these are the procedures used by companies that you're going to be seeking employment with. So we know that when you finish here and you present a resume with a portfolio of work to a contractor, we know that they're going to look at it and say, well, we do it a little bit differently, but your approach is pretty much the same as what we do. That's why we want to make sure that you're doing it in the right consistent approach. Okay, standards or procedures are followed for reviewing the bid documents. Again, it only works if you have a consistent process. We talked about material prices with lumber. I have to have up-to-date information. If I bid based on what the price of lumber was a month ago, I could be in big trouble. I have to make sure that every single addenda is listed and included in my estimate. And quite honestly, most bid packages are going to ask you to tell them what addenda you've included. If there's 12 addenda on a project, and when you bid the project and you fill out the form says, I have included for addenda number, and they leave it blank, and you have to fill in 1 to 12. If you fill in 1 to 11, your bid could be disqualified because you haven't fully covered the amount of information that was given to you. Here's the other thing I want to do is I want to try to get my subcontractors as early in the process as I can. Okay, I want to identify that I need a masonry contractor. So I don't want to go to them 2 days before the bid is due and say, hey, can you give me a price? I want to go to them 2 weeks before the bid is due and say, hey, this is coming up. Here's the drawings and specs. Please give me a price for it. Okay, and excuse me, one of the things that's going to happen for some of you in the construction program specifically, when you get to your 3rd year, you're going to do what we call a work placement. And you'll go 1 day a week and you'll work in an office. And it could be an architect, an engineer, a contractor. And you'll get a chance to sort of observe and participate in what they do. And one of the things that you'll, any of those students that go to work for general contractors usually get a chance to sit in on when a tender is closing. In other words, it's Thursday afternoon at 2:30, our price is due for this project. And they'll ask you to just sort of sit in with them and watch what happens from 1:30 to 2:30 when they're putting all the documents together and finalizing all the prices and making all those final decisions on getting that final price that they're going to submit for the project. Okay. At that point in time, you're going to get an understanding of what we mean by subcontractor prices early in the process, because you may have 12 or 15 subcontractors and your $20 million price might be $15 or $16 million of subcontractors. And that last hour in that office may be the time when all those $16 million of prices come in almost at one time. And your job as an estimator is to go through all that, decide which ones you're going to use, and formulate your final price on the project. Okay? So you're going to sort of get a real appreciation for how important it is for you as an estimator to have all your work completed and finalized before that last day, because it can be extremely stressful in the last bit of time. You're also going to get an appreciation for how organized you have to be, because those prices come in fast and they come in close to the deadline, and it's going to be your responsibility to sort them out and make quick decisions on which ones you should use. So when we talk about obtaining subcontractor prices early in the process, we're talking about trying to minimize the stress level in the last 1 to 2 hours of what's going to happen. An addenda is an architect sends you a set of drawings and specifications, and then a week later, he sends out maybe a one-page thing that says addendum number 1. And addendum number 1 might say, All the brick on this project has now been changed from an 8-inch concrete masonry unit to a 6-inch concrete masonry unit. Okay, and that change is going to maybe have a big effect on your final price, but it's a one-page document that came through that made that major change for you. Sometimes those changes are a result of one of you guys as an estimator calling up that architect. And remember before I talked about drawing 7 was different than drawing 17? Sometimes after that happens, the architect says, oh boy, we made a mistake. Drawing 17 is wrong. We're going to fix that. So they go ahead and fix it. And now they are responsible not just to you, the one who brought up the question, they're responsible to every contractor who's going to bid. So they need to make sure that everyone out there gets the same information. And at that point, they issue what's called an addendum to the project. And that informs everyone of the change.
Dino, do we have a minute? I have the City of Niagara Falls webpage up here. And on the City of Niagara Falls webpage, they post their bids and tenders. And
Sure.
There is an example of form of tender, tender documents, and addendums. Do we have a minute? I can bump over and show my screen?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I am on the City of Niagara Falls website. And with the City of Niagara Falls, they post not only their upcoming bids and tenders, so work that they want done at the City of Niagara Falls, but they also post their historical bids and tenders. So you notice this one I have here, it says Falls Boulevard Reconstruction Phase 1, Underground Servicing, Murray Street to Ferry Street. And this was in early 2021. And you'll actually notice that the company that got awarded was Von Gibbons Contracting Limited, and that was the bid amount that they specified. But with this, the closing date was March 30th, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. And there's a list of attachments that in order to submit your bid to this, you would have to go through. And if we look at the actual, I'm going to look at the bidders list first. Okay, so these are all the companies that actually gave notice that they were interested in this project. So you'll notice that there's 7 of them, right? And it has the contact name for each one of them. Then you'll actually notice who the actual bidders were. And this one here is the official results. So on March 30th, 2021, only 4 companies of the original 7 actually put a price in. And what you'll notice is that the tender price, but there was also a corrected bid. And this is where one of the ones where maybe as a co-op student or a freshly hired person at the city, you might go through and actually check the math from all of these submissions. And you'll notice that Centennial had a small error, only resulted in less than $2,000. But they each, when the bids come in, they double check the values, right? And so you'll notice on this one, significant difference between the other 3. They were all in the millions, and Von Gibbons was just under $3 million. So they were awarded strictly based upon the cheapest. They did go for the cheapest, yeah. So that one is a bit of interesting. The other thing you'll notice is that there were 2 addendums issued. Okay, 2 addendums issued. And it's up to the company to ensure that they included those addendums. And you'll notice addendum 1 and addendum 2. But before we get to that, I want to show you the full specifications. The full specifications is actually 330 pages of information, right? 330 pages of information. That's a lot of info to have to work through. And you'll notice that it's broken down into all kinds of different divisions. Right, so there's a lot of information when we look at the actual specifications. They also have a specific form of tender, they call it, form of tender, where you physically have to enter in your prices as a company into the quantities. So I'm just going to scroll down to where that is. So you'll notice when you work for a municipality, when you're working for a general contractor who wants to bid on a job for a municipality, they have a standard form that they use for quantities. And it's broken into sections, section A, B, C, D, etc. The first section is a general section, and they have some lump sum pricing. But then they also have, if we look at here, silt controls, they also have a price based upon the item. So to put in these catch basin silt bags, they figure there's 17 of them. You put in the price that would include to actually supply the bags, but also the equipment that you would use, the manpower that you would use, and you would also put a little bit of profit. So you put in a unit price to place those individual bags, right? And if we go to section B is different roads, again, it's the unit quantity. So in order for your company to place the 9,370 cubic meters of roadway, earth excavation, in order to remove that quantity, your company would put the unit price, and that unit price would include the manpower that it takes, the equipment that it takes, and any profits that you're going to put into that price. And then I just wanted to show, so you have the original document, but then they do have these addendums that Dino was talking about. Addendum number 1. This addendum is actually 17 pages, right? So you have to make sure that what it is, maybe there was questions that were related to it. And so they thought, okay, we need to put out an addendum to clarify something that was not understood in the original documents, right? So they've changed some pages. And so it's very, very important that you look at the addendums. So I just kind of wanted to show you guys that. Oh, and then I wanted to show you the drawings as well. Okay, so here's the drawings. Again, there's 38 pages of drawings, right? You want to make sure that you are looking at the drawings themselves, 38 different pages. We have an index. Then it shows some general notes. Then this is a whole legend about what different types of things mean on the drawings. Then we have typical sections and details. Again, typical cross sections. The overall alignment page. Then we have plan and profile drawings for specific locations along that roadway. Right? So 38 pages. So you have to not only read that 330-page document, you also have to be relating that 330-page document to the drawings themselves. Right? So estimating is a very, very important part of the building process. I think that's all I wanted to say, Dino, unless you wanted me to go to something else.
Can you go to the form of tender?
Yep. I'm not sure which page it is. This one? This one.
No, yeah, just scroll up.
You want me to go page 1?
Yeah. And then just scroll down. I think that, yeah, keep going. So let's stop right there. So here's one of the things that could happen, guys. Here's we're saying that we're agreeing to do the work. And the last sentence says, in accordance with the drawings and contract documents referred to above. So that means the drawings, the specifications, and the addenda for the total tender price of. Now, the total tender price needs to be written out in words, just like you're writing a check. And then it needs to be in here in numerical form. And if you were to write, 4,256,533, and you wrote the number 4,256,533, and those two numbers don't match, your tender is disqualified. You could be thrown out at that point. Okay, this is how picky these contracts can be when you're submitting it, because this is a legal document. And although that might seem really harsh to you, imagine if you're one of the other contractors who did all the work exactly the way they're supposed to, took the time to be diligent about writing everything out correctly. You're going to turn around and say, wait a minute, there's 5 of us here. 4 of us did this right. 1 did it wrong. You can't accept the one that was wrong. And so, in fact, we had a time when our students participated in a bid competition that ran through all the colleges across Canada. And our students worked very, very hard. And their first page of their submission got them disqualified because they put in the number in dollars, but they didn't write out the actual price in words. And as soon as they looked at page one, they were disqualified from the competition. We say that because we're not trying to be overly picky. We're not trying to be, real hard asses about this thing. We're doing this because that's actually what happens in industry. Okay, so we want to get you guys conditioned to covering all those small details. All right, let me jump back in. We've only got about 10 minutes left, so I want to zip through the last portion of the lecture, which we should be able to do pretty easy. There we go. Okay, the variables that we'll deal with, and I'll go through this quicker. What's variable? What changes on a project? Labor availability and pricing. Okay, I need to make sure that I'm using current labor rates if there's a union contract, and if I'm working in any other area other than where I live. In other words, I'm a contractor in Niagara, but I'm doing a project in Toronto. Toronto labor rates may be very different than what they are in Niagara. I need to know that. The project location. Okay, if I'm working down here in the wintertime, no problem. If I'm working in Thunder Bay in the wintertime, I'm definitely going to have to think about that. Material availability, we talked about lumber and steel. Those prices can change drastically. Subcontractor arrangements, okay. One of the things that could happen is I may have to work with subs that I don't know, that I've never worked with before. I need to know, who they are and what their capabilities are. What is it going to cost for overhead? When I talk about overhead, what I'm talking about are the expenses for a project that aren't directly related to the job. In other words, when I'm on the job site, I have a job site trailer. That's directly related to the job. But then I've also got the salary for you as an estimator. That's not related to the job. That's part of the overhead. That's part of the cost of me running my office and employing you estimators and drafters and people like that. Those are overhead expenses, and I need to know what those are. I need to be accurate with that. Building codes change. And when building codes change, I need to know. Okay, I just talked to one of our grads the other day who was mentioning, he says, there's been a change in the building code. He says, and when I'm putting Tyvek tape onto, or putting Tyvek wrap onto a building, I just found out that I'm not allowed to use red tape anymore. I have to use blue tape. So the cost to him was, when the inspector came by, he says, you have to use blue tape. So he had to go to every one of the joints that he'd covered in red tape and cover it in blue tape, just because there's a building code change that affected that project. The environment, of course, as we said, if we're looking at, and site conditions sort of goes along with that. Anytime where I'm thinking about working in inclement weather like winter, I have to factor that into my pricing. Talking about site conditions, here's an interesting picture for us. There was a building here, and you can see how close that building is to the one right beside it. So if I thought that I could just run in here and start knocking this thing down, or maybe I was going to use an explosive and drop the building down, I had to think twice because I had to be aware of the site conditions. When I got the drawings for this building, for this job, it didn't show me the building beside it on either side of it. It only showed me the drawings for this building. I need to be aware of how close the other buildings are and how I'm going to be able to actually do this job because of what's beside me. Here's an interesting job site. I'm not sure where this is, But just to give you an idea of the scope, that's the people. You can see all the workers on this project. And you can see the crane rental companies were awfully happy with this one. Look at the number of cranes that are on this project. Big tower cranes. And in fact, it goes all the way around to the other side. You can see there's cranes all the way through this project. Okay. There could be things on this project that can turn into hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars when the project's over. For example, the parking lot for all these workers to come in and park at in the morning might be way over here somewhere. So knowing what the site conditions are, I may look at it and say, well, my first thing is I'm going to have to price into this job is I'm going to have to price the purchase of a couple of buses and pay full-time bus drivers to be at that parking lot and bus all these guys over back to where my site trailer is over here, because they literally cannot park close enough to where I want them to be. Well, this project, and this is looking at what we're looking at here, this might be a 3 or 4 year project. Imagine the costs over 4 years of a couple of buses and full-time drivers that's working every single day, and the gas and the maintenance. So knowing the site is critical to us putting it together a correct price. The construction systems that we're going to deal with, and this is sort of going to give you an overview of what's going to happen in this course. We're going to talk about frame construction, and that's basically wood frame construction. That would apply mostly to residential construction. We're going to talk about structural steel. We're going to learn how to calculate the quantities and prices for structural steel. We're going to also do a lot of concrete work. And we'll also cover masonry construction. So pretty much the major types of construction systems that we'll see in industry, we're going to cover for sure in the 3-year construction engineering course. And in the 2-year civil engineering technician, we won't cover things like structural steel or masonry. We will definitely do some concrete work. When I talk about frame construction, this is what I'm talking about. Wood frame, whatever type of building that there is. When I'm talking about structural steel, this is what I'm talking about. When I'm looking at concrete, and this is kind of a nice example. This is some very beautiful concrete work that, you know, obviously is not the norm that we're going to cover, but I just like the picture, so I put it in. And in addition to cast in place concrete, this is precast concrete. This is a building, portion of a building that was built off-site and brought to site. And then there's masonry construction. Well, we won't be doing all the fancy stuff that you see on here, but this is a brick constructed building. Okay, we're going to cover all of this now, and that is the end of my slides. Let me just escape out of there. And what I do want to do is just spend just a couple of minutes before we finish with our, close that. Come on, where is it? I just want to open up the workbook. As soon as it decides that it's ready to open. There we go. Okay. First year workbook is here. Civil 1130. And I'm going to open that document. Oops. Okay. So I just want to quickly look at it. You guys have this workbook, okay? And a whole lot of what I just talked about is in this workbook. This is interesting. This is just a bit of words of wisdom about where you're at when we're in school now. Here's the links to all those videos that we talked about. And here's some of what we just talked about, okay? Here's some history of what a quantity surveyor is, but you're going to eventually see, look, this is similar to what we just talked about, the pre-construction process, the construction process. So when you need to sort of rehash what we just covered today, you're going to see that most of this is in the workbook, okay? And we've broken this down. There's more information here than I covered, so I would like you guys to spend a few minutes in going through this. The estimating process is covered here, the variables, the construction systems that I just showed you, again, with a little more description. And that's it. So when we're going to look at the first quiz that's going to cover this introductory part, it's going to basically take you from page 1 to page 23 in your workbook. Okay, and as I said, our quizzes are open book. So when we have that quiz, you're going to be able to look at all this information. What I want to emphasize to you is an open book test does not mean an easy test. Open book test means that we are well aware that you have access to all these answers. So we're not making it harder, but we're definitely going to presume that, you know, you haven't memorized all this stuff. You have access to the information. The important thing for you is to have read through this and have a grasp of what's in this workbook. Okay, this is going to be your resource. And Denise and I have gone back and forth with this many times over the years. And, you know, we've spent more time on this introductory section in the past. And we thought, you know what, we don't want to spend a ton of time on it. We've got 2 classes that we've covered it. We want to jump into the math. We want to jump into actually doing stuff. So as of our next class on Wednesday, we're going to start into the next section of this workbook, which is the unit on math. Okay, we're going to talk about construction math, basic estimating math. So it's up to you guys to maybe fill in the blanks, read some of the rest of what's in this workbook, but everything we covered today is in your workbook. Okay, talk about perfect timing, Denise. It's 12:20. That means class is over and we are just finishing on time. We're starting to get good at this.
Yeah.
Okay, guys and girls, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. We will be meeting again on Wednesday at 11:30, and we'll start jumping into the next chapter then.
Dino,
Okay.
we have a question about a degree of becoming a civil engineer.
Yanis, through the Construction Engineering Technology program, the 3-year program, we've had many students over the years move on from that program to a university here in Ontario called Lakehead University in Thunder Bay. And there's an agreement between Niagara College and them, and those students go up to Lakehead University. They do about 3 years at Lakehead,